You know what they say? Melody is queen for a killer song. And guess what? It's true. Wait, is that really what they say? I don't know if that's... Well, that's what I say. So boom. What's up, everybody? It's Nathan Larsen here, back at you with another video for those of you guys who make music at home, whether you're an artist, songwriter, producer. If you write and record your own music at home, this is the channel for you. And by now, you should know it's time to subscribe. Just click the button. It's right there. Do it. And in this video, I'm gonna be sharing 5 songwriting tips that pro songwriters and producers alike use, and it's going to blow your mind. Let's do it. They are simple, they're straightforward, and if you use them right stinking now, I guarantee your songwriting game is going to be, well, it's gonna be better. We'll just put it that way. So tip number 1, simple is almost always better. A lot of times people think that writing a better melody means that you have to learn how to create more complex or complicated melodies, and usually the opposite is true. A more complicated melody and more complex melody is just that. It's just a more complicated and more complex melody. If you're wanting to create melodies that are actually going to truly resonate with the listener, actually captivate your listener, keep them wanting more, keep them truly listening, something that's actually catchy, then the truth is that simple is almost always going to overrule complicated. Now, I'm not advocating that you write the most simple, dumbed down melodies you could possibly write. What I am saying is that too often when I hear melodies that are just all over the place, it's confusing. Now, with this one tip, I'm actually going to be directly applying it and showing you how to apply it in the remaining 4 tips. But a few things on this. So why is it that simple melodies are typically going to work better than complicated melodies? The real reason why is because simple melodies tend to be easily digestible, whereas complicated melodies that just kind of go on and on and on and on and on and never actually return to where they first started, those melodies are virtually impossible to actually remember and recognize. When I was in college getting my degree in music composition, there were so many times we would do these ear training exercises where we listened to this very long and complicated melody, and then we would actually have to transcribe that melody down after only hearing it once or twice. And I can tell you, it's extremely difficult. But the melodies that tended to be a little bit simpler were so much easier to remember. You could listen to it once or twice, and then you could basically just sing it back exactly how you heard it, which is much easier to digest. You need to keep in mind that for someone listening to your song for the very first time, they have no idea what your melody is. They have no idea what your song is even about. So the question becomes this: are you composing melodies that are actually causing your listener to want to listen to more of that because it's actually easy to digest, or do you want to create melodies that are very complicated and just kind of go all over the place? If that's you, then I guess you could probably just leave this video. But if you actually want to keep your audience invested in your song, simple is almost always better. I'm going to actually demonstrate and show you how to do that in the next 4 tips. So that brings us to tip number 2. Great melodies and catchy melodies are primarily going to use chord tones. So what is a chord tone? A chord tone just means that whatever chord it is that we are playing, let's say a C major chord like this, chord tones are just the notes that actually exist within that chord. So a C major chord is going to have a C, E, and a G. Now this can go up and down all the octaves. So it's not only 3 notes, it's actually quite a bit more as far as the octaves go, but it's going to be those 3 primary notes, and then obviously you can bump it up or down an octave depending on what you want to do. But most really catchy melodies are typically going to orbit around chord tones. Now, I did not say only use chord tones. I did not say that they never use anything other than chord tones. I'm saying that they are going to orbit chord tones. I want you to think about notes as actually having somewhat of a gravitational pull to each other. I'm actually going to demonstrate this to you by playing chords to show you that notes actually have gravitational pull to one another. So we take a C major chord here, but then we go to a G7 chord. Now, if I just stop there, that should probably make you feel a little uncomfortable because you want to hear this. It's because that resolution of this, we want to hear that everything's resolving. So notes are the same. They have this orbital kind of gravitational pull to one another. That note, that B, wants to go back up to the C. The F wants to go back down to the E. The strongest gravitational pull is going to exist with the chord tones. So if you're writing a melody, you want to primarily be using chord tones. In fact, you can actually write melodies that only use chord tones. They're probably not going to be as interesting. I'm going to show you some ways to write melodies that don't only use chord tones, but let me show you what I mean. Let's actually take a chord progression: C, F, A minor, G, C. Okay, let's go ahead and create a melody. I'm just going to improvise one. Let's start on C. Okay. Okay, I did kind of, that was not a chord tone, but we'll get to that in a second. Every single note that I just used existed in one of those chords that I was playing. So that's C and E, and then F, that's an F. A minor, C is part of A minor. That's also part of A minor. G. Now this isn't a lesson on chords and like how notes within a chord works. That's something that you definitely want to learn, is how chords work and what notes actually exist within a chord. That's going to help out a ton, I promise you. But the main thing is I just created a pretty good melody. It's not the most catchy melody ever, but that's a melody that's quite functional with using only chord tones. Let me see if I can create something that's actually really catchy. Whoa, look at that. Very few notes, and that also goes to show that that melody right there was very, very simple. I mean, that's like super, super simple. And then obviously then we could go ahead and create lyrics to that and then turn that into an actual song. So that right there is number 2. Use chord tones primarily. Not only, but primarily. We're gonna get into how to use non-chord tones right now. That brings us to number 3. Number 3 is that your melodies should primarily use stepwise motion. Good melodies are going to use more stepwise motion as opposed to leaps. Let's rewind real quick and let's just kind of take a step backwards. When it comes to writing melodies, you realistically have 3 choices. Let's just start on C. You can stay on the same note and then just vary the rhythm. Bum ba dum ba dum bum 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 bum. It's the same exact note. We're just using different rhythms to stay on that same note. I love you, baby. I really, really love you. I don't know, I'm just making something up. But the point is I literally just stayed on the same note and then just made up a lyric that has a variation of rhythm, and boom, that's technically a melody. It just doesn't really go anywhere. The next thing we can do is we can either go up or down by a step, and we're gonna do this within the key. So if you think about a scale, we've probably all heard that. That's just a simple major scale. So we're gonna stay within those notes, and the piano C major is all the white keys. We can either go up a note or down one note. That is stepwise motion because we are literally just staying within a step up or down from that starting note. The third option is to incorporate leaps. Now, there are many types of leaps, so obviously there are not only 3 types of motion or 3 types of directions you can go with melody, but you can jump up or jump down by leaps. Or that's a major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 6th, major 7th, and an 8th or 8th octave. So obviously there are different intervals in which we can leap and jump, but the main thing here is this. Your melodies are going to sound way better if you primarily use stepwise motion. Check this out. Again, I'm just improvising here to demonstrate that those are good melodies, functional melodies, maybe not the best melodies, not the melody I actually want to have for my song, but demonstrating that you can use good melody with all stepwise motion. And in that way, when you start incorporating those leaps are actually going to add some sparkle, some shine. They might be used to take you into a different register of that melody, like something like this. That right there. Those leaps were actually relatively strategically placed. The other thing you need to keep in mind is that those leaps were chord tones. Whenever you leap from one place to another, you are probably going to want to leap to make sure that they actually are notes that exist in the chord. That goes back to our second tip. Here's what would happen if I were to actually leap somewhere that was not within the chord. This doesn't sound very good, right? Now, if I resolve down, that's a little less egregious, but still. Just doesn't sound very good. So all in all, if you're listening to a melody and it's really catchy, chances are it's primarily going to use stepwise motion, and it's going to use those leaps or those jumps sparsely. I'm not saying don't ever use leaps, don't ever use jumps or anything. That's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what I'm saying at all. Don't roast me in the comment section for that. What I'm saying is that typically you are going to primarily use stepwise motion. Even think of one of the most famous melodies by Frank Sinatra, Fly Me to the Moon. Da 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 da. It's just walking down a scale. Fly me to the moon. And then it leaps up. Da 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 da. That's also walking down in stepwise motion. Basically just going down a scale, but it's using that leap to get us into a new place. Fly me to the moon. Da 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 da. And then it brings us right back down into that melody. So that right there is number three, stepwise motion. Tip number 4, repetition is key. Repetition is key. You see what I did there? I said a rip. Okay. Now, again, I'm not advocating that you just repeat everything over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, because obviously that's not gonna work. However, if I were to make a melody that went something like this, go ahead, try singing that back for me, would you? And that's because that melody had literally no repetition, none whatsoever, which means your ear had basically nothing to actually hook onto. So, a couple ways that you can actually use repetition. 1, if you introduce an idea over the course of one cycle of a chord progression, that would be one cycle. If I do that chord progression again, that's now the second time I did that chord progression. So you can introduce a melody using many of the things that we've already talked about so far. The thing that makes the most sense is just to repeat that. Cool! All of a sudden, now that's a melody that I can actually remember. You could sing that back. Da 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 da. Boom! All of a sudden, that's actually a pretty darn catchy melody. Would you agree? I hope you do, because it is. So the main thing is, first of all, you can simply repeat an idea a second time. Now, if I were to repeat that a third time, all of a sudden it's kind of like, okay, I've heard that already. Maybe it's time to do something different. So a really good rule of thumb when it comes to just songwriting in general is that if you do something, you repeat it, that third time, you gotta go somewhere different, or else at that point it's just too repetitious. And this is something that I critique my students with Producer Accelerator all the time on, is like, hey, you repeated that thing like 6 times. I mean, that's kind of overboard, don't you think? So this repetition thing can be overdone. Sometimes you just might repeat things way too many times that you're just gonna completely lose your audience's interest. However, if you're not repeating anything at all, ever, guess what? You're gonna lose your audience's interest. The second way that you can actually repeat ideas is using what's called motifs. Now, a motif is just a really cool, fancy word for a fragment of a melody. In other words, just a small piece of a melody that will then be repeated on. Now, you can do things like sequencing. So for example, so the motif at that point would be this. Da da da. Very, very simple. It's just a fragment of an idea. Da da dum, da da dum, da da dum, da da dum, dum. All it is are those 3 notes that I can then find ways to repeat in different ways. So I'm not actually directly just repeating this. I mean, that's kind of weird and kind of lame. I mean, you could do something. You could find ways to make that kind of cool, but if you were just to do that over and over and over and over and over again, that gets pretty old pretty darn fast, wouldn't you agree? So again, that motif we can then use and then change where we actually place it, change the starting note. Then we're gonna do it over that F major chord. which means we're gonna start on the F now. Then go to A minor. Boom. Now all of a sudden we have something that actually makes sense. So that is the idea of writing motifs, is to have some sort of idea that you can then repeat in sequence in different ways. Another way we could do this would be like this. I took that motif, and now you can just do it all over the place and then change where it starts based on the actual chord that you're using. So at the end of the day, if you want your melodies to make good sense and be catchy and actually keep your listener invested, you have to repeat ideas. I'm not saying always repeat all the time, every single time, 5,000 times. I'm saying that you need to repeat in a way that actually makes sense. Do it once, do it twice, and the third time, go somewhere different. That is the simple rule. Boom, my work here is done. That is tip number 4. And before we jump into number 5, if you are a self-producing artist or a home studio producer looking to truly level up your game as a home producer, you need to check out my program, Producer Accelerator, down in the description below. I also have a free training where I cover the 7 keys to pro home studio productions, and that right there will make sure you are focused on the right things as you produce your music. That brings us to tip number 5, and that is to vocalize your melodies. Yes, vocalize your melodies. So far I've been using the piano, but the thing is that oftentimes if we're just gonna start singing a melody just out of thin air, just kind of make something up, it's actually pretty difficult to just like come up with a melody that sounds like crap. Like, I don't think most people are gonna come up with a melody like do 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 da do da do. I'm like, that's what? Hopefully you can understand that most people are not going to just why is this so funny? Most people are not going to just like come up with these ridiculous melodies if they're vocalizing. Typically, if you're going to vocalize, and by vocalize, I just mean find a syllable or a do-do-do or a la-la-la or a something that makes sense for you to sing and just start singing. Pull out your phone with the recording app and record yourself singing, and guess what? You're probably going to find at least fragments or pieces of a melody that you like. And in fact, on my phone right here, I have this voice recorder app, and I have literally just, banks upon banks of ideas. I'm not gonna show you them because they sound like crap, but the main thing here is that I actually do this all the time. I might be in my car having an idea, I will pull out my phone and just start singing. I might even have like one lyrical idea, like, I wanna chase my dreams, I wanna chase my dreams, I wanna do 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 do. I wanna be my own. I mean, like, I'm making something up just completely off the blue here. Those lyrics probably maybe aren't gonna make the most sense, but like, I wanna chase my dreams. That might be the start of a really good hook. And then I can figure out how I wanna actually continue creating the melody of that, the lyrics, how I'm gonna do that, whatever. And then I can come up with what chords actually make sense underneath that melody. So it could be a do-do-do or a la-la-la, it doesn't really matter. But it turns out that if you actually start vocalizing melodies, it's much easier to come up with something that's catchy because you're doing it on a whim. And most of the time, if you just start humming or singing a melody, it's probably going to actually be pretty good because it's actually relatively difficult to just sing a really crappy melody out of nowhere. And if you start using all the things I talked about here, using stepwise motion and using repeated ideas, all of a sudden you can start kind of vocalizing melodies that are gonna make very good sense. Da da dum, da dun da dun dun, da dun dun. Da da dun dun da dun da dun da dun da dun da 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 dun da dun dun da da dun 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 da dun. And then pull out your phone, record it, and then turn that into an actual melody that you're gonna use in your song. So if you have not already done so, make sure you subscribe to the channel down below. Give me a like, drop a comment, let me know which of these 5 you found the most helpful and useful that you're gonna start using right now. We'll see you in the next one.